New business, first item is BLM lease parcels, and I prepared a statement to read. First, I'd like to sincerely thank Helen Hankins, Bart Sharrow, and all the other BLM staff members that have traveled to Paonia so that we can speak directly to them. As I was deciding how to conduct this meeting, this portion of this meeting, I was quickly made aware that there was a seeming pent-up demand for a public meeting with the BLM. A full-scale meeting of that sort would require a much bigger venue and 4+ hours to conduct. The town of Paonia is not in the position to do that meeting. We'll leave that meeting to someone else. This board has been working for an hour already, and after this portion of the meeting, we have another hour or so of meeting to do. So we have some certain time curtailments, and to that end, given the public interest, we allow people to provide comments or questions that they would like to ask of BLM. They were submitted both to the town and different trustees, and as I filtered through those comments today, I came up with several different groupings. They sort of naturally fell in 6 or 7 groupings. And during this portion of the meeting, we'll just try to work through those groupings. It would be best for this council if this portion of the meeting lasted an hour. That's unrealistic. So we'll just keep moving and do the best we can with what we have. We won't have perfection here, but we're going to do our best. I ask everyone to be respectful in this meeting of the views that they hold and the views of others who they may not hold. And even if you don't agree with them, and decorum is required. So with that, as I went through the comments that I had, the questions I had, there were groupings that were made pretty apparent. First grouping was resource management plan related questions. Second, public participation. Third, air quality. Fourth, water quality. Truck traffic, economic issues and potential of the resource. And then some smaller numbers, miscellaneous number of protests and first-hand accounts. So we'll start with questions to BLM from the town on resource management plan. And I'm open to council members just asking any questions, and I'll fill in with questions that that have been given to me.
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment. I thought the meeting was at the request of BLM, and that they were going to give us an oversight of where they were, and then we would ask or have interrogatories of them after they made their presentation. Am I misunderstanding?
You're absolutely right, and thank you for correcting me. We're going to do a short presentation on process.
Okay, we can do that.
We get that to work? Okay. Which one is it? Try that. Try that. Okay. Well,
you can just set this one up on the corner of the table, and Ross and I can use this one.
Okay. Will that work for you? Thank you for your flexibility. These work out.
Okay, I think it's always good to start with a process. I know that you as council members may or may not have been involved in the process for the last 14 months. But began about last November, where we had our field office. I'm Barb Sharrow, by the way, and I'm the field manager for the Uncompahgre field office, and I live in Montrose. We received a package from the state office last November of 22 parcels, about 30,000 acres, that were nominated for an oil and gas lease sale. Our process recently changed, and so it went from, it used to be a 90-day process. Anyway, we began last December and came out with a 2-week scoping with the parcels that were in it. There was a lot of outcry and people asked for a longer period of time, and so we had a longer scoping period. My staff then put together a preliminary environmental assessment that came out to the public. Again, there was an outcry. People said there wasn't enough time to review what was in the environmental assessment, so an additional period of time was given for additional input. We then took the voluminous comments. We got a lot of comments. I think people can hear if there's not an outcry every time if we're going to keep this down to an hour. So 700 came in at that point, about 700 comments. My staff went through them and we looked for the significant issues and made some calls. It took all summer and this fall to go through all those comments, so it was not taken lightly. We took a lot of time to look at very specific issues. Then we came to kind of a final decision, not a real final decision because the final decision doesn't get signed until 2 days before the sale. But we again came out to the public with what we thought would go in the sale, or what could be suggested in the environmental assessment. What's proposed right now in the environmental assessment is that about 1/3 of the acres that were proposed to begin with would be deferred. Those are due to steep slopes, those are due to municipal water supplies, the byway, jumbo recreation area, and there was one parcel, it was a portion of a parcel that was taken out due to the school near Hotchkiss. So we tried to look very carefully at all the issues and any of the reasons that we would take out, and we took out about 1/3 of it. Then we came out to the public again in mid-November with kind of our preliminary decision and went into a protest period. Now for a protest period, we accept protests from people who have participated earlier in the process and still have issues or complaints. And my staff has been going through those since the middle of December. So we still, as I said earlier, we have not made any final decisions. We felt, Helen actually felt it was very important to talk to the elected officials because we know that you've been hit hard during the last year with a lot of the issues that this lease sale has brought up. So we wanted to come and talk to you directly to see if there were things that were still lingering in your mind, if there were questions that you'd have of us directly, that we could answer directly for you. There have been a lot of questions about public process, and again, I just outlined the opportunity for public involvement. In addition to that, Delta County sponsored a forum last spring, a day-long forum that we participated in, and we had a specific meeting set up on the oil and gas lease parcels that people could come and directly talk to us and ask us about these things. Senator Schwartz held a public hearing. Lori participated in that. BLM has a resource advisory council. They met this summer in Hotchkiss, and as part of their meeting had a public comment period, and again we had a lot of people there that voiced their concerns about the North Fork. There were some people, actually some people in this room that requested a meeting with me. I met with them, a one-on-one. So there was opportunity over the past 14 months for a lot of public involvement and a chance for questions to be asked and answered.
Thank you. And does council have any questions about the process? Hearing none, we're going to move right on.
I keep hearing from our constituents as it relates to the process, that at least the BLM should consider the completion of a current resource management plan.
If we could, I understand everybody's enthusiasm, but continually clapping is going to make this double the length that it already is.
Vis-a-vis a amended plan that was originally completed in the 80s, and we appreciate that you've attempted to keep it updated. However, it seems to a lot of the people in our community that before any decision is made on parcels of land to be let for development, that a more current plan with current conditions should be considered. And I think that I speak for a lot of people in this room, and I'm not trying to say that we don't want any development, but that before you make a decision on leasing any parcels, that plan be completed, at best reduce the impacts even more than you already have, and at best just remove all the parcels from consideration for leasing.
Okay, I'll address that. Our plan was signed in 1989. We have had 15 or 16 different amendments over that period of time. They've been for a number of different reasons. A couple of examples, we had a programmatic solar EIS that was done across several states, but the results of that solar EIS, which actually allowed for more solar to be developed, amended our resource management plans. We have done a couple of different travel management decisions in the time period, the latest of which was 2010, that amended our plans. So as issues have come up, we have tried to address that in our land use plan. As we wrote this environmental assessment, we not only looked at our existing resource management plan, but we looked at a lot of other things. So we took into consideration these amendments. We looked at different policies that have been passed. For instance, some new onshore orders were passed in the time period since our resource management plan. So we took those in consideration as we looked at the lands.
Can you tell me what onshore orders are?
Yeah, onshore, well, maybe Lonnie can do that better. Lonnie Bagley, he's our Deputy State Director.
Good evening, everybody. Again, Lonnie Bagley, DSD, Deputy State Director for Energy, Lands, and Minerals at our Colorado State office in Lakewood. An onshore order is basically a part of our regulatory process under the 43 CFR 3160 regulations we operate under. Has a clause in it where we can develop further regulations that would regulate the particularly drilling of wells, production, site security, and so forth. So it's just another avenue, you might say, to put requirements into place that the director has that capability to do that, and it's a step down from the regulations developed in section.
Onshore orders are passed. Onshore orders are passed by Congress. So what they do is they provide additional regulation under which we have to follow. It's simpler. And the operators have to follow. So.
Is this in conjunction with like the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission? I mean,
actually these are federal laws and regulations, and we work very, very closely with COGCC. So actually we work very closely, so we consider COGCC's new regulations as well. So just about anything that you can think of, like even Fish and Wildlife Service, announced a new policy or a new proposed listing for the Gunnison sage-grouse. We're taking a look at that, even though it was just a week ago. So as things come up, we try and be relevant. I did take a look at, whenever a project comes into BLM, and there's a lot of projects that occur around here, but whenever it comes in, we go through the same environmental analysis, considering the same type of resources, regardless of what kind of project it is. So whether it's an oil and gas lease, whether it's a coal lease or a coal modification, it might be a ditch that's on BLM, it might be a road right-of-way, or maybe DMEA wants to build a new transmission line. Maybe a private property owner wants access to some of their land across BLM land. Any kind of projects, recreation related included, grazing, any of those we have to consider under the National Environmental Protection Act, and we look at all the same types of resources. So we look at air quality, we look at water quality, we look at noise, we look at all the same sorts of things. And you know, we all do that. Our Bible, our main document is our RMP. So in 2012 and 2013, and we're not that far into 2013, there were 25 projects that came into my office that we had to review under NEPA, as to whether we would allow them to go ahead, whether we would put stipulations or mitigations on them, etc. So if I don't have my RMP, if it's so old I can't work it anymore, then how do I handle those 25 other actions that walked in my door in the last 14 months? Do I say no?
Please, this is not, I'm reminding you of the decorum I asked for prior, and so that very specifically stated, council's asking questions, and we will get to our follow-up questions here in just a moment. Larry, did you have one?
To answer your query, why is there a time constraint? Why do you have to consider these 25 proposals before a new RMP can be
Well, I would ask you that. I mean, like, for instance, there's a new ditch that's going up Minnesota Creek. Do you want me to wait 3 years till my RMP is signed? Yeah. Okay.
My question is that the initial concern in November 2011 seemed to be that the feeling was that the RMP was outdated. And at that time, the information given was, well, we're updating it right now, we're working on that.
We are.
So while that's happening, as well as you stated that the onshore regulations are passed on by Congress, in 2010, Congress stated that the hydraulic fracturing process was a real unknown and requested the EPA to do a study, and that study's still happening. Why can't we wait until those things are finished before you move forward?
Thank you.
I think I'll let Lonnie answer that one.
In relationship to the hydraulic fracking rule, the BLM was also developing regulatory requirements for hydraulic fracking. The EPA, we work with them closely as well. Currently, operations on public lands, we review the proposals for drilling a well, and currently we have not had any problems with hydraulic fracking.
Please.
So in the state of Colorado, there's not been any problems with hydraulic fracking.
Please.
The process we go through is a very important process for us, is the wellbore integrity, which we have a diagram up on the wall behind you that talks about. The first thing we want to ensure is that that wellbore is capable of handling the pressure of a hydraulic fracking operation. It's going to ensure we don't have any leakage inside or outside the casing from that wellbore into the wellbore. So we're making sure that those operations are consistent, and it also is regulated by the state of Colorado, hydraulic fracking. So also the state of Colorado has passed new regulations where they are requiring additional water testing to be done, and that's before the fracking operations occur into your freshwater zone, and also during the fracking operations, and then continuing to the life of the well. So as we move forward and developing our rules and requirements, we are monitoring what hydraulic fracking operations are, and the You might say that the design of the well bore, again, is the most important thing we do, and we're going to continue that in our operation.
I'd like to add that, you know, with the number of newspaper articles you see and stuff, there isn't a whole lot of trust in the statement you made based on, you know, internet searches and those kinds of things. It's just what I hear from our constituency is there's not much trust in that, and that is a very basal issue with the reason that people have such difficulty in this valley. I'd like to ask whomever, with regard to Secretary Salazar's order, secretarial order, I guess they call it, how is all this process fit in with the master leasing and development plans that's requested in his, or required in his order? And then also, in that order, it emphasizes leasing in already developed areas, and then careful planning for leasing and development in new areas. And I can tell you that this board, I certainly hear a lot of what was submitted to me in the last couple of days, very specifically addresses both of those, as everybody feels that this is a new leasing in a new area.
Actually, there have been federal leases in this area, and there are some to the north up in Muddy Creek, so this area is under lease. However, we do follow the Secretary's instructions. We do, the leasing reform was part of what we're doing today. We've expanded and allowed more public input into the process, made it more open, and we do then also a lot more detailed analysis than we ever did before. And that was part of Secretary Salazar's instructions to us, was to provide more analysis, making sure we're making the right decision. And also then, in relationship to master leasing plans, we have done master leasing plans in our RMPs that we have 7 of our 10 offices currently going through planning efforts. And they have master leasing plans included in them. And this particular plan did not have any designated master leasing plan areas identified in the process of revising the RMP.
And can I ask you why that is?
The criteria, for one, was pushed us to, there are several criteria such as an area could be mostly leased already, you may not conduct one. The issues that might be out there in conflict with oil and gas development is another one that need resolved through a more detailed analysis. So, land ownership is another. In this area where it's 44% privately owned, and then it's governmentally owned either through BLM, Forest Service, or state-owned mineral.
And master leasing plans don't apply to Forest Service lands. So it's a big distinction.
And you, I believe that the situation we're sitting in here with a room full of people that are very eager to hear some information would indicate to me that maybe master leasing development plans should be in this new RMP, and then which begets then, if that's going to be in there, yes or no, and I'm seeing yes.
It won't be in there exactly as a master leasing plan, but we're going to be analyzing it very similarly to what we would analyze a master leasing plan. So you're not going to see the words master leasing plan, but we're looking at all the resources, we're looking at all the issues that we would look at in regards to a master leasing plan in our RMP revision.
Okay, and then that, with that information, then it begets the question of why not wait then? I mean, we're in a circular argument here, but...
Our draft resource management plan, our draft, we're not sure exactly when it's going to come out yet. It's in several reviews yet, like with the Washington office, et cetera. But we're hoping to be out to the public in April, May, June of this spring, something like that. There will be a 90-day public comment period. We will go out and have open houses in the community.
Why not wait?
We'll take those,
Please.
we'll take those back into, all those comments then back into review. We'll come out with a proposed plan about a year from that point. And then there will be an opportunity for protest, again, on the resource management plan. And then we'll come out with our final record of decision. So we're looking at being 2.5 to 3 years away from any kind of decision. And that's if we don't have, that's if we're not litigated.
Correct. And I believe the point of the secretarial order was to try to reduce litigation through upfront stuff, and which the constant thing that I'm hearing is, then if that's the point, then why not wait? I understand we're not going to resolve that issue tonight, but what I hear and what I have in all these papers that were delivered to me is, why not wait? And the other one I wanted to get to was the deputy director said that leasing is in this area, and there are some maps provided to our council members, and you can have one too, of the existing wells, and most of them, yes, are up in the muddy country, but I can tell you that the citizens in the valley here look at that as a very separate thing. And if you look at the map, that the producing wells are all up in the muddy country with the exception of maybe one down in the Oak Mesa area. And I didn't have time to study this, but the citizenry around here sees very specifically as a separate thing. And I'll get to that in my closing comments, but the part of what makes this valley really great is all the great food production and stuff, and I believe you're aware of all that. But also part of it is the fact that you can hang out at Zur's Winery up on the hill and look across the valley, and it is spectacular. And I, as well as many other people, have seen gas development that looks much more industrial, much more scar-like than what we have here now and what we appreciate. And that would be the probably equal footing number of comments submitted to me in the last 2 days. And so while I understand you say that it's all in the same area, to us it's a very, very different picture.
Well, maybe if I could take just a few minutes and show the maps that we put up back here.
You may certainly do so.
So I'll talk as loud as I can. How's that sound?
As good as it gets.
Okay, this is an overview map right here of the whole lease parcel sale, or at least the part that's down here in the valley. We don't have some of the upper ones in there. We took a careful look in our environmental assessment at all the issues that were brought up. So these black and white circles are kind of all over the board here are the municipal water supplies that we receive from you and from Crawford and from Hotchkiss, okay? So we did take a careful look at that, and there's pieces here, and you can't really see it, especially out in the audience, but there's black and white parcels here that intersect those municipal water supplies. We are proposing in our current environmental assessment of this project to defer those parcels, okay? The red here, the red crosshatch, are the proposals that in our proposed environmental assessment would be in the sale, okay? There's on these maps, we also went to the COGCC website, and we did the same thing that you did on your map, and we put all the existing wells in here. So for instance, there's a well that was drilled here in 1953. There was a well drilled here in 1982. There was a well drilled here in 1949. There was one here that was drilled in 1981. So there have been wells that have been drilled down here in the valley And you can go on the COGCC website and actually see if those were viable wells, what they were looking for, what they produced, how far they went, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of information that you can look at. One of the other issues that came up was all the ditches, again, in the water supplies. So we put all the ditches on these maps. So you can double check them and see if we missed any, but I think we got most of them because we got most of this information from you. So that's just sort of in up here. We have the byway, so any leases that were in that byway area, we also deferred. This is a blow-up map, so you're getting down to where you can actually see your personal house on here. You can see how close it is to the sale. This area is a jumbo recreation area. Again, in our proposed environmental assessment, based on comments that we got from you, we're proposing to defer that. There's a section here also that we're proposing to defer. Again, the red with those marks is proposed to be in the sale. They're a little bit further removed from town, etc. Up here, there's one up here. The green is, again, we're proposing to defer it due to steep slopes. So those would not be in the sale, at least as we're looking at it right now. There's probably some overlap here. Let's see, here's the town. So again, jumbo, this is the same. It's not a different, it's the same parcels over here. We just overlapped it so you could see everything really well. These would be proposed to be in the sale. This one, we're proposing to defer because it's in your municipal water supply, okay? So we did take a look at that, okay? So I just wanted to, there's a detailed little thing here, so if there's any questions. We're leaving all these maps with you, so you can keep them and look them over.
It'll take us a while to digest all that information. So you touched on one of the subjects that the town has been concerned about, as well as many comments that came in with this, was the, and the town does appreciate you taking out the parcels that have our watershed. That is very, very important. Of almost equal importance as it relates to the ability for people to make money in this area are the ditches, as you mentioned. And several of the comments that we received talked about, and I understand the federal government looks at leasing a little bit different than the group of people sitting here, Mike, but the question I receive on a regular basis, well, what are the contingency plans for any kind of spill that would happen, and how it relates to all the organic farms or anybody's operational farm. Not all of our farms are organic, but
they're all important.
They're all very important to our well-being, and our it's difficult to make a living in western Colorado, and very few of us are very wealthy. So there's like a zero tolerance on those kinds of questions. And what's your answer to that kind of issue where, ditches, spills, how would we protect our farms?
Well, let me address that and probably several other issues I heard coming out of the conversation. So I'm going to go through a few things, interrupt me if you get questions. First of all, I'd like you to just pass around what our lease sale process is. It's a synopsis of every step we take. And also, I'm going to pass around a fact sheet about North Fork Valley, and one side is a timeline for how long this sale has gone on and where we're at today. But on the other side, I give you some information about oil and gas development in the valley, and also some leasing information. So let me pass that around, and also goes into coal development. Let me pass those around. First of all, why do we lease? It's very important to the nation, and the mandate that we have is to address the imports we are making for oil and gas or fossil fuel. We are in a course now where we're going to be probably 50 years in a transition of moving away from fossil fuels into other types of energy out there. So we can't just stop fossil fuel development, waiting for other things to develop, such as solar or wind or other energy sources. So through that process, we have a mandate through the Mineral Leasing Act of 1920. The Secretary has been mandated that we will offer lands for sale, and we do that through other legislation as well. We are mandated to have a quarterly sale each year, 4 sales per year, and they're a competitive process. And so we make these lands available upon a nomination process that anyone can nominate a parcel for development. So you have landmen that go to a courthouse and determine where different acreages are, and they look at the federal acreages, and then they will sit down and develop a nomination process, which then is submitted to us. We then take that nomination process. The nominations, or we call them expressions of interest. We split them out by parcels. No more than 2,560 acres is a statutory requirement for the size of the lease that can be offered. And then we develop a parcel list. And then that parcel list is sent to the field office for beginning of review and a initial posting period. And that's all explained in that process. So as an agency, we're mandated to look at these parcels that come in. We just don't shelve them. We go through the environmental analysis and determine against the RMP that's currently in place whether or not those lands could be offered for lease. We look at the criteria is if we have a situation where we have a resource, let's take steep slopes or recreational issues. Our current RMP does not support restrictions for steep slopes. In those cases, then we have deferred that until we can fix that problem. Then, and most likely what it will be as a no surface occupancy on steep slopes, because the erosion problems, as we all might imagine, could occur. And also the scarring that could occur. So we go through that process, evaluate each parcel. It's the resources that are there on the ground, and the resource protection measures identified in the RMP. And if those measures are such that that parcel could be leased, governing what we just determined from our analysis, each parcel is looked at, visited, determine what resources are there, then we make a decision whether or not to put that up for lease. The public comment period then offers an opportunity for new information to come in about those resources and the protection of those resources. And it goes on through that process. So we're moving along and offering lands for lease. Energy independence is important to the nation. And we're playing the part, we're doing our part to make those lands available for lease. And also protecting in a multiple use aspect of protecting those resources that need to be protected.
And so how does that relate to our ditches and zero tolerance for we need 100% protection?
Yes. Being coached by my partner here. Once a lease is issued, the operator has to then apply for a permit. And the same analysis occurs as it does during the leasing process, only in a site-specific location. So in that location, we look at the effects that operations can have on those resources. Ditches, for instance. We're going to set back away from those ditches so we don't cause any harm to them from the drilling operation or excavation. We're also going to look at best management practices, so where we're going to site that well in the proper location. We can restrict them to that lease to protect those measures. So we're going to burn the location if necessary. We're going to look around the location and divert stormwater so it doesn't get on location and then carry products off the location. So it goes into those best management practices that we employ. And we have an entire book on what we give the operators. This is a guide you can follow. It's called our gold book. And it provides different best management practices that the operator can employ to protect resources that they might be interfering with.
Is there any, I'm sorry, is there any protection, I hear the protection that you do on the ground level. Am I not loud enough? But is there any protection during the actual process? Because I've heard people say that hydraulic fracking does not, that contamination doesn't happen from that process. But what protection is there from getting a natural fault or those kind of things that then contamination could be spread that way and make its way back up to surface?
Well, that's where the drilling plan comes into effect. The operator gives us a drilling plan where they're going to set their casings, identify all the formation tops, what hazards they might be encountering, and then they have to take measures to protect those or eliminate those hazards or protect the resource. So we're going to set our surface casing down to the freshwater zone. And we're going to set it in a competent formation, and we require the operator to test that formation to make sure there is no communication back up the backside of the wellbore. Proper weight and grade of casings run, the proper volumes of cement are run, and set in place, and we make sure that that's done. In the approval process, we ensure it is designed to do that very thing. Then the production casing is drilled, and it's also cemented to protect the other resources that might be out there, such as the another oil-bearing zone that they're not planning to develop at this time. So they're drilling to the target formation, and we're protecting that wellbore, as in the diagram explains there how we run those casings and set that cement in place.
No one can hear what you're saying. Can you guys turn on the mics? And there's a lot of people here in the hall who can't fit in the room.
Go ahead. We'll do our best.
Better?
There's lots of room up there.
Yeah, there's room up front.
There's a big crowd out here that can't fit in.
Okay, there is room on the floor for another 20 people or something right up front. So if you're inclined, please do so. We want to try to keep moving along so that we can keep going. I wanted to add, I heard what you said, but once again, not a lot of trust in the process from people that are commenting to us. And I don't know how you could possibly improve that, but there certainly is very little trust in that and in the security of that, because it's, we're in a desert, and the water that we have is what water we have is very valuable, and we have, like I said, a zero tolerance for any kind of issue. And I don't know how you're going to improve the trust, because that's one of the elemental issues here, is that there is very little trust in oversight. You keep seeing numbers in the paper about how many regulators there are per wells, and and all this stuff, and none of that leads to very much trust, and that's one of the core issues that we're dealing with.
Sorry. Can I bring up a couple statistics that are actually pulled off the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission website, and stated in the Denver Post that there, in the last 5 years, there have been 2,078 spills reported, and 17% of those have contacted groundwater. In Weld County, 40% of spills contacted groundwater. So we can't say that through all your details of the process that this does not happen. It does. The data is there. Can you tell us specifically what the hazmat response is when there is a spill?
Well, the operators is, I guess when you look at the statistics, and you can maybe equate that to the number of incidents that don't occur and the number of wells that might be out there, could give you some relationship. However, when a spill occurs on federal land, the operator is required to report that to us and describe what that spill was, how much it was, where it went. We then have requirements. We'll come out and visit that site, and we'll require that operator to clean it up. There is no guarantee that a spill is not going to happen. There is no guarantee that a well is not going to blow out. What our responsibility is to minimize that risk and put the measures in place.
Zero tolerance.
Please.
That put the measures in place that will require the operator to clean it up. We'll try to prevent that spill. That operator will as best they can. You have equipment failures that are unknown. And so there are measures, and I can't guarantee you that there won't be a spill. There won't be a blowout.
What is the, how do you clean up contaminated groundwater? How do you do that?
Well, there are various ways, and we work a lot with the state in all of our organizations. They have the health department, they have requirements for meeting water standards. And there are various techniques depending upon the type of spill, the product that's spilled, as to what measures will be taken to clean up a spill. It could be that they will drill monitoring wells and also draw wells out, draw the water out, clean it up, put it back in the aquifer until that stream is cleaned up to a point where it's usable again.
The questions all come from.
I can answer the hazmat question. Every operator, when they come in with an APD, or if we work with them on a larger development plan, has to have a hazardous waste plan. So they have a plan in place before it happens, and they have a way to respond to it. We look at that very carefully when they come in with the application to drill.
So it would depend on the operator to clean up the spill. There's no other agency involved, it's the operator only?
No, CDPHE is involved, other state agencies, as well as BLM, if it's on a federal well. There's a lot of private wells around here, so if it's on a federal well, BLM is involved.
But we do hold the operator responsible for the cleanup.
Yes.
They have to meet the standards and take care of that operation.
And you have baseline data for water quality?
There are several sources of baseline data that we have obtained, and we know what that is. There's also state rules that are asking for more detailed sampling prior to operations occurring. So that's ongoing and fresh on the street in the state.
I've heard a lot of different answers, but I just wonder, in point of fact, is oil and gas drilling exempt from the Clean Water Act?
There are certain operations that I don't know the details at this point. There are operations that are exempt from the Clean Water Act.
But the major ones, like a lot of the spills that occur are trucks that just, tip on the roads as they're going up to the site or whatever. And those laws apply just like any other semi going down the highway, okay? So
I'm glad you bring that up, because that brings up a specific point to Paonia, which is, I don't know if you've noticed, the roads here are very bad. And they're falling apart, and they're one bad winter away from completely breaking into pieces. Oh wait, that's happening already. And has there been any thought about that? They're like, the infrastructure of this town simply cannot sustain that kind of traffic. And has there been thought about that?
What's in the fluid?
Please.
I think you all have this year, this 14 months, and what goes beyond is a great opportunity for you as a town and as a county to come up with some plans for how you're going to deal with this.
If this continues, we're going to just stop the meeting, okay? I made a request for civility, and they're taking their time to answer our questions, and we're not going to be yelling at them.
Not answering.
There are 6 townships that are right in this immediate vicinity with Paonia, Crawford, and Hotchkiss. If you look at the map, there's 6 townships. So I took a look at those 6 townships. 44% of it is private minerals. We have absolutely no control over private minerals. So somebody could be coming in, and somebody may already have, if they're really intent on developing a gas field here, and made a private agreement with private landowners to do a well. All it takes is for that operator then to come in with an application to drill to COGCC, and 30 days later, that company can be drilling. That has nothing to do with us leasing on federal lands. That could happen tomorrow. That is why I made the statement that I did. We have a long, involved process on the federal side, and we're going through it right now. If these leases are even bought, then the next thing that happens, and it may or may not happen, in my field office, about 300,000 acres are already under lease. Some in the North Fork Valley, some in other parts of my field office. Of that, I believe 42,000 acres actually have some sort of drilling or have had some sort of drilling. So 42,000 acres out of 337,000. So the operator, whoever buys up the leases, if they are bought, may or may not come in with an application to drill. If they do, and it's on federal land, it will go through the very same process that we have just gone through on the oil and gas lease sale. They will come in with, generally a company's not going to come in with a proposal to drill 50 wells because they want to know there's something down there. Each well costs about $1 million to drill, so they're going to want to carefully explore to find out if there's anything there. If they come in with an application to drill on public land, it's a public process, okay? We'll come out with a scoping notice to you. We will go through the whole thing. We will work with the local government on roads and ditches and all that sort of a thing on that specific well. It's generally the shortest, an 8-month process at the very minimum, and oftentimes it's a lot longer than that. Generally then they'll come in maybe with a second APD to drill or a third APD. Now up in the muddy, Gunnison Energy and SG Interests have been drilling for about 10 years. They've been drilling exploration wells, and we are working right now. We'll be coming out with a notice in the very near future to look at a 150 well proposal from SG Interests in an EIS. So it's an environmental impact statement. That's a 2 to 3 year process in which we'll go through, and we will have public meetings. We will meet with you. We'll take all your public comments. So that's sort of how the process works. And we work very closely with landowners. If it's on private service, they're invited to every meeting that we have in regards to what's going on, etc. So it's a very careful, thoughtful process. But remember, 44% of your valley is private minerals. No control on my part.
I wanted to switch them to air quality.
Sorry, Neil, if I can interject. We were going to try to go through each section at a time and answer all of our questions. And I still don't feel like we've had an answer to the original question of the section with RMP, which is why the rush to lease before the RMP is being released in the spring. Did we get an answer to that?
I think we did talk around it, but let me see if I can address it in a slightly different way. My name is Helen Hankins. I'm the state director for BLM. And I'd actually like to talk not only about land use planning, but a little bit about oil and gas leasing reform, because I think there was a little confusion in the discussion about master leasing plans. So let me start with resource management plans or land use plans. We use those terms interchangeably in BLM. Under BLM's Organic Act or our primary legislation, which is called the Federal Land Management and Policy Act, we are expected to do resource management plans. The life of those plans is generally 20 to 30 years. But when we do those plans, we try to anticipate as much as we can what might be happening in a particular area, over that period of time. Some plans, not much changes, although in some places in the West, and so even though that plan may be 30 years old, the assumptions made, et cetera, are still good later. In other places, as Barb indicated here, when we do periodic reviews of our plans, which we do routinely, at least every 5 years, then we develop amendments to address what we identify during those periodic reviews as areas in the plan that need to be addressed through a land use planning effort. In the case of the Uncompahgre Basin Resource Management Plan, we have updated that 16 times since it was completed. Now, the policy of BLM since 2004, and actually I think before that, but I didn't look, at all the old instruction memos, but at least since 2004, the policy of the BLM has been that because we manage the public lands for multiple use and for many people to use the public land for many purposes, our guidance, our policy is that we use the existing land use plans to conduct any business on public lands until we replace it with a new plan or we amend it. Now, in this particular case, in the North Fork, it was already mentioned that one of the areas in our existing plan where we don't have a stipulation that we think is good enough is in the area of steep slopes. So we made a conscious decision to remove the parcels with greater than 40% slope on all or the majority of the parcel from further consideration at this time. We also, and Barb did go through this, is in the process of preparing this environmental assessment. We looked at our existing land use plans and we did a very thorough analysis, and that was not done only here in Montrose, but it was done with our air specialist in Lakewood. We had some of our hydrologists in Denver look at it. We had our NEPA specialist review our existing plan. We also asked our solicitors to look at it. So we did a lot of review with our existing plan, which is normal, and determined that using the existing plan, and I'll come back to that in 1 second on one other point, we then prepared a very comprehensive environmental assessment. In this case, it's more than 280 pages, and there are substantial references in that document that provide additional information to augment what's in the existing plan. And that is consistent with the policy that BLM does in terms of how we operate until we can do a full revision on the land use plan. The question is asked, why don't we wait? That clearly is an option, but here's the difficulty that we have. Somebody could say, why didn't you wait on the West Alcoles? Why didn't you wait on Oxbow? Why didn't you wait on Valley? And let me tell you why this is important. It's very difficult for us to say our resource management plan is not going to work for one kind of energy development, but we're going to say it's going to work for a different kind of energy development. Because when we're talking about exploration, oil and gas, which is all we're talking about here, if that, because we're not even sure, as Barb had said, that anybody will even offer one of these leases should we offer it. But the kind of impacts that we're looking at in terms of air and water are not significantly different than what we look at for coal at this stage. And so when we're looking at our land use plan and its adequacy, we've got to look across the whole spectrum. And in Colorado right now, 60 or 70% of the lands that BLM manages are under land use plans that are being revised. And so we have to think about, there's a big chunk of country in Colorado where we're doing ongoing land use planning, but we're still getting a lot of demands from the public for lots of uses, all kinds of uses, not just energy, but recreation, transmission lines coming down from Wyoming that are a priority with our secretary, and many other kinds of uses. And so, although, you know, people would like it if we just said, okay, we're going to stop, we don't really have that luxury because there's so many demands by a lot of public to use the public lands. We have to follow our existing policy, which is to use our existing plans until we replace them. We have to evaluate those plans where we don't think they're strong enough. The case here is the steep slopes, then we're deferring those parcels. You know, we believe that our environmental analysis is strong, and I have to be honest with you, based on a lot of the questions we've gotten from folks, I don't know how many folks have really looked at the analysis in that EA, and I hope you have. But we feel like we've done a lot of analysis, and I think if you look in the back of that EA, there's 50 pages where we looked at all the comments we received during scoping. We looked at the comments we received when the EA was out in draft, and we responded back inside that document about what we did with those comments. So the short answer, and I probably told you more than you wanted to know, but the short answer is we have to continue operating under our existing plans because that's the choice we have if we're going to manage public lands. And we have to look at those plans and continue to entertain requests from the public, whether it's for a single oil and gas parcel, whether it's for a coal lease modification, whether it's for a transmission line coming down from the Powder River Basin to Las Vegas, all those uses. And, you know, it's not the kind of world I think that everybody would like to see, but there are a lot of demands on public lands for lots of purposes. And so the difficulty that our field managers have is to respond to a whole range of demands and try to find the right balance. And now let me talk a little bit about master leasing plans because I think I need to clarify something. Prior to this administration, prior to President Obama's administration, the Bureau had essentially a two-step process that dealt with oil and gas leasing. The first step was, okay, we're going to do a resource management plan. In that resource management plan, we said, this land is available for oil and gas leasing or it's not. And if we said it was available for oil and gas leasing, then we would include constraints, which might be timing limitations for wildlife or other kinds of constraints. Then the next step was the public could come in, or an oil and gas company could acquire that lease through our leasing process at the time, and then they could come in with an application for a permit to drill. So we define it in the land use plan, we lease it, and next step, APD. What this administration did under oil and gas leasing reform, which is the process that we're in here, is they included an intermediate step. So now we already have a land use plan in place that says these areas in Colorado, well, let's stick with this area. These areas in the Topography Field Office, which is about 1 million acres, are open for oil and gas leasing. Now the new step, which didn't exist until we had oil and gas leasing reform, is that we are going out to the public again, and we're saying, these areas were identified for leasing, you know, in our original plan in 1989. We want to go out again, and some people call it giving the public another bite at the apple. And we want to go out again and ask the public, what do they think about the leasing of parcels that industry has identified? And so the process that we have gone through, you know, in our initial scoping, the BLM received 3,000 comments. In our, on the draft EA, we received 700 comments. In the protest period, we received 150 protests. During that time, we've been involved in at least 3 meetings in this community. We didn't host them, but we participated in them, trying to gather public comment about these parcels. And, you know, that comment ranges from no fracking to issues about water and air and wildlife and fisheries to not in my backyard. I mean, it's a whole range of comments. So our challenge is to look at all of those in this intermediate new step and try to look at what we know about the topography in the area. That's why we did these maps. And then make our best call on whether we think we should go forward with offering these parcels for lease. And we're still in that process. But that entire set of actions is new. The BLM did not start doing that until 2010, when this administration came in. So that's one part of oil and gas leasing reform. There's a whole new intermediate process between the land use planning and between the filing of an application to drill. Now, master leasing plans, and I won't go on too long about this, but in many places in the BLM, people have land use plans that are 10 years old. And so maybe they're not going to do a land use plan revision for 10 or 15 or 20 more years. So a big part of the idea behind master leasing plans was that we don't want to wait 20 years to look at these issues. So we're going to introduce a new concept of a master leasing plan that will take a more focused look at possibility of oil and gas development in a particular area. Now, in this case, in the Uncompahgre area, we're already doing a new resource management plan. And Barb told me that we had gone out, and this was probably 2 years ago or more, Barb was scoping.
Right.
And so a couple years ago, so some of you may not have been involved, may not have lived here, I don't know that. We had 25 meetings all over this field office in preparation for this resource management plan that Barb is working on. And we gathered a lot of comments, a lot of input, got a lot of different ideas, which is the same thing we would do if we initiated a master leasing plan at this time. So we've done the scoping, we're developing a range of alternatives which will come out in the spring, as Barb said. And so in effect, we're doing planning at a pretty detailed level based on all those meetings and incorporating what we heard from the public. And because we haven't quite gone through all the internal reviews, we can't roll out those alternatives yet. So then the question becomes, well, if you're doing planning that looks at, oil and gas leasing in the North Fork, the question, that you folks are asking is, well, why don't you just stop everything? And I think that's a fair question to ask, but our current RMP, and Barb will correct me if I say this wrong, Our current RMP for this area provides for a maximum number of wells over the life of the whole resource management plan, which we have not met. And it also provides for, and Barb, if I say this wrong, correct me, it provides only for the drilling of 10 wells per year. And that's for the entire Uncompahgre Basin RMP. That's the threshold in the existing land use plan. You know, that's very different than what we see in Meeker or the Silt office or up in Craig, where we're dealing with hundreds or thousands of wells, probably hundreds of wells per year. So because the threshold in our existing RMP is so low, you know, historically we've only seen how many wells per year in your office, Barb? 2?
2, maybe 3, the most.
So what we've seen historically in this field office, 2 or 3 oil and gas wells per year over, how many acres does the Uncompahgre plan cover?
800,000.
So 800,000 acres. So that's why, for us, it's reasonable to consider operating under the existing plan, because that threshold of 10 wells per year is so low, and since 1989 we have never even approached 10 wells per year, and that's the whole office. That's not just the North Fork. So that's probably more background than you wanted, but hopefully it helps give a little context to where we're at and maybe why we're thinking some of what we're thinking. Does that help answer your question? No. I'm addressing my comments to the council.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. There were some information was provided to me that the Spokane office in Washington deferred some lease parcels based on pending completion of an RMP, that Taos did for the same reason, maybe Lander, Wyoming for the Beaver Rim area and Bighorn Basin for the same RMP question. So the question proposed was why, if they're doing it in those places, why not here?
You know, each case is unique and it's case by case. So I can't speak to those plans. I don't know what they're in them. We can only deal with what we have right here.
Are we? Yeah, we're ready to move on. Air quality. One of the issues that the town addressed in our protest letter was that the same drainage winds that protect our crops from freezing, they blow down from the higher elevations right down the valleys, and they congregate right here in town. And the issues about air quality are pretty contentious in that regard. And what's your response to that?
Well, for this lease sale, we don't have any proposed drills, okay? So again, my field office, 37,000 acres that are leased, 42,000 actually, something on there. There may not be anything that happens here, so there's no impacts. We did look in our environmental analysis. We looked at what the air quality is right now. There's a baseline. We're not even close. I mean, that's a good thing, right, for everybody here? I mean, that's what we all want to maintain. That is what the goal of BLM is with water and air quality and other resources. So that is why we take the time to look and analyze. When the APD comes in, we'll look at that air quality and water quality issue again.
I guess and you're bringing up the part of the process that what I hear the community most disturbed by is that, you know, there is no effect from leasing in a federal view of this, and the bulk of the people are here because they feel like there's an effect, and there's a very big disconnect between the process that you're involved in and what the common person feels on the ground, and I'm not sure how you will overcome that. More questions on air quality? Water quality?
Yeah, I have one I'd like to read.
Can I just say something real quick?
No.
Would you guys mind, no, I'm sorry, would you just mind if I try to help?
Fix the
Oh,
sound.
absolutely.
Okay,
Okay, I think that would help everybody.
Ignore me.
The control panel's right here.
I have
I wonder if it's, and I think maybe possibly if people could get a little closer to it, I could be wrong because I don't know these mics, but maybe.
I have a written out
speak
question.
just a little closer and turn yours down a little bit, and everybody turn it down a little bit.
The main volume, there's a main volume thing right here on the back side. Thank you, Bill.
Because it's really unnerving.
I was trying to ignore it. Go ahead, Amber.
Okay, I'll read my question. No cumulative analysis of air quality impacts exist for oil and gas development in the Incompagre Field Office or for the North Fork Valley specifically.
Go ahead.
Updated science clearly shows that ground level ozone as well as volatile organic compounds and other air quality issues are a reasonably foreseeable impact that follows oil and gas development. See page 30 of your environmental assessment. Especially when this development is permitted under committing these lands under this 1989 RMP. The BLM has been losing court cases in Colorado based on the lack of any meaningful air quality analysis and has had to redo numerous oil and gas plans, as well as had the Roan Plateau RMP overturned due to this total lack of proper analysis. How is the North Fork different? Why does the BLM think it does not have to provide this analysis prior to irretrievably committing public resources to industrial development?
Again, we outlined in the environment, am I doing okay here? Okay, in the environmental assessment, again, we did portray the knowledge that we have. And we felt like it was sufficient for what we know the actual development will be, which is we really don't have a clue. We have a fairly proven track record in the Incompagre Field Office for doing air quality analysis on industrial type of project proposals. We have quite a track record. I think we've had 22 coal actions that we've approved in the last 5 years. And we did extensive air quality analysis for those projects. And the same type of air quality analysis applies to oil and gas leasing. So we feel like it's adequately covered.
Coal isn't as the concern that we have with the oil and gas because there's different compounds involved in the oil and gas. Coal is a whole different ballgame.
So coal is good?
Well,
Right.
we're not talking about coal. Isn't the BLM obligated to analyze and monitor these air quality impacts to protect the human environment?
We are at the APD stage.
At the drilling stage?
Yes.
After the land's been opened?
Which gets back to the part I discussed earlier, with the disconnect between the leasing and drilling stuff. Are there any more questions on air quality? We've sort of gone over water quality.
I have something else to add for water quality. Barb Sharrow, at the Resource Advisory Council meeting in 2012, you stated that there would be no drilling in the town's designated watershed. Presently, there are 7 parcels considered within Paonia's designated watershed. Can you explain why this land is still considered? And do you think it's appropriate to place industrial development between a town and its source of drinking water?
We took a look at your source water protection plans. And so your source water is protected with these leases. That's why that blue parcel is removed, because it was actually in your source water protection That does not cover the entire watershed. If we protected all the watersheds for every town in the Intermountain West, we would have absolutely no industrial development whatsoever.
Please.
But the nature of our watershed is that we don't exactly know where those pipes are or where they run. As they break, we find where our water.
That would be alarming if I lived in Paonia.
Well, okay, that's why we're concerned here. There's multiple springs we pull from, and they have been put in place in the 1920s?
30.
So our concern is that if you lease the land between us and our springs, that something could be hit in between. Do you understand those concerns?
I do. Are there other actions that occur on a daily basis that happen between the town and the springs?
Not as deep as well drilling, no.
Well, again, when the APDs come in, that is something that we evaluate. We look at where they want to drill. We have the opportunity to move. We have the opportunity to move well sites up to 200 meters. So, and further, if there's a really good reason, we will work with you. Hopefully, you'll find out where these pipelines are, so that we can work with you on that. And again, you know, we do have pretty strict contracts with the oil and gas companies. So if they did do something to your water line, we'd work with them to get that fixed.
Okay, that's, again, we're running up to the question of where the public would like all those kinds of issues addressed up front at the leasing stage and not the drilling stage. And we will perpetually run into that, as you're aware.
I have one on sort of ancillary to water quality. And that would be regarding the water that's used in the fracking. Apparently millions of gallons per well, and that water is contaminated with chemicals, and then I've heard that it's extracted after the water is injected, and what happens to that water?
I'm going to let Lonnie actually answer most of that, but the first part of it is probably where do the operators get this water and how do they get it and all that kind of stuff. They operate under Colorado water law just like you do. So farmers have to have their water rights in order to water their fields. You as a private landowner have to have some sort of water right or buy your water or something to water your lawn. The oil and gas operators operate under the exact same laws. Okay, so they either have to own their water rights or they have to buy water from like the ditch companies or somebody else in order to get it. But I'll let Lonnie answer the other part of the question.
So we know where the water is going to come from. They have to have a permit to get that water. And in the fracking process, we've all heard in the news and on paper that chemicals are used in the fracking process. 98% of the volumes used in the fracking process are sand and water. Sand and water. 98%. The other 2% are made up of chemicals that provide for the operation to succeed successfully. For instance, friction is a big issue in hydraulic fracking, so they add a chemical that is a slicking agent, you might call it, so that the water can move down the wellbore at a better rate and reduce friction, reduces pressure against the casing, so on and so forth. They also add in an agent that makes that volume kind of thick so that the sand is suspended within the volume. So that is pumped down the well, and these volumes are then pushed out into the formation, and fracturing occurs, and the sand is then dispersed throughout those fractures to hold up the fracture. Another agent is put down as a blocker to react with the thickening agent to eliminate the thickening part, so the sand is not carried back from the formation into the wellbore and not used as a propping agent as it's designed to do. These volumes are then produced back to the surface and held in tanks. There are requirements for disposal of that fluid. The BLM's new regulations on flowback water is going to strengthen what we already have in place in one of our onshore orders, number 7, which deals with disposal of produced water. And it's going to strengthen that to the point where they have to have a permit for disposal of that fluid. Largely, the industry is moving toward recycling the fluid as best they can. If not, the fluids that are disposed of are disposed in a approved, permitted well by the state, which is supported by EPA regulations. The state has primacy for underground injection, and then those fluids are then disposed in those underground formations that are at a similar or worse condition than the water that's being placed in them. Now, where can you find out about what's in those fluids? There are several websites out there. The most common one is Frac Focus. The operators do report their combination of fluids and the chemicals that they use in that combination. And you won't get the amount of each fluid, but you'll get the chemical, what it was. So if there's a leak that's been determined from our fracking operation, samples are taken from water wells, and just determine if there's something in that water that was never there before. You can trace that back to the chemicals that were used in there, and well, at least verify if that is where the source came from. Then the operation is if there is contamination, there are methods for cleaning up those formations we talked about a little bit earlier. It's done through the health department at the state level, community that North Dakota went through, and you may want to call up the mayor of Wilson, North Dakota, or Whopper City, North Dakota, and see what they did and the impact that they realized from oil and gas development. I'm not saying it's not going to be painful, but there is ways to work around that, and if you get involved with the companies early on and the local governments that you deal with, you can head off some of those things that they may have wished they'd done earlier as well. So that's one way of doing it. The oil and gas industry is just like the coal industry. They want to be a good neighbor as well. We've proven that, we've seen it. And again, they're going to be a good neighbor to you. They're going to live in the area. There's people in this community who's probably going to work for those industries. So, you don't know. Maybe not in Paonia, but in other areas around the area. So they're going to want to employ local people.
Who is the oil and gas industry?
Right, we don't know if there's a volume of gas here that's worth development.
Yeah, and that's another question that'll come up 2 sections down, but do you want to go? Do you want to have more questions? Okay, next one is there are numerous direct questions. One gentleman wrote in, he's up on Garvin Mesa, which is outside of town. Fairly contiguous to one of the parcels, and I could dig up the number. But he feels like, and if you look at housing values around here, I think it supports his thought that, you know, a lot of the value, especially on Garvin Mesa, is the views. And he feels like his property values will significantly decrease because of that. And isn't that enough reason? I mean, his question was, isn't that enough reason not to do it?
In other areas where there's been production has come in, it's been proven also that housing prices went up. Values of property go up.
Maybe temporarily due to shortage, but shortage of housing as they ran into silt and all those places. Most people here don't feel that would occur. They would feel it's a negative, a real potential negative, and I believe you had a group of realtors write a letter in the protest about that very issue. And what should you go ahead with the lease, what recourse would anybody have, a private individual with a loss of property value? What recourse do they have?
I guess I can't respond to that. I'm not sure what recourse they would have. Although I could say that you're also going to have leasing of private minerals here too, not only the federals that we pointed out before, and that's going to affect the same concern.
I have in the last 25 years since the 1989 RMP was released, Paonia and the greater North Fork Valley has grown the well-deserved reputation for organic agriculture, clean, free-range meats, and award-winning wines. Taxpayers have put hundreds of thousands into this valley in the form of grants for irrigation systems, agriculture, and tourism. These investments are for the long-term economic development of the North Fork Valley. Oil and gas development proposed for this area is not worth it from a simple cost-benefit calculation. Pollution from this development, whether real or perceived, would be detrimental to our thriving local economy. Does this consideration have any influence on your decisions?
We have received a lot of concerns regarding that issue, no doubt. Lots of letters, lots of other kinds of mail, etc. It is something we took into concern in writing our environmental assessment. And I think if you read the environmental assessment, you'll see 2 paragraphs in there that talk about the organic orchards. So yes, it is a concern. Frankly though, you know, we did some in-depth looking at it, and compared to the other agricultural activities that are happening in this valley, we're concerned about all of it, not just the organic farms. There's a lot, I would say, based on what I could find on the web, and most of it came from you guys, less than 1% of the valley is organic orchards. I think there needs to be a concern in all 3 of these valleys for all of the agriculture. And that is a concern of the BLM, and we did analyze that.
Analyze it. You ignored it.
Please.
They're not answering the questions that you're asking. That's why we're getting pissed.
Oh, I understand that, but yes. So obviously that they're wholesale questions on, some of them they can't be answered. If you lost property value, there's potentially no recourse. We have ag is one of the biggest, probably right behind the coal mines, it's the 2nd largest.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's the
Total
largest.
Total ag, yep.
And so, you know, obviously huge concerns, and it's, you know, most people don't get rich doing any of this stuff, but it's part of why we all live here, and we, based on all the responses I had, that we can't afford to lose that. It's the one thing we have that's a long-term thing. Gas development comes, goes, you know, it ebbs and flows, all that other stuff. I mean, there's histories of all that, but it's really difficult for us, as you can see, to deal with that kind of issue.
And I guess I bring up organic agriculture because are you aware that fracking in the area can affect a farm's organic status?
Again, there are a lot of activities that are happening in your valley right now. As you mentioned yourself, you know, there's 3 coal mines that are right here that have a lot of the same activities. So
No!
They're good neighbors to us.
I think the oil and gas companies can be good neighbors too.
It's not that's not what you find in the papers, whether that's legit or not, I don't know. Next subject I had was potential for the resource, and if you talk to an average, or not average, a geologist, we're on the southern edge of the Piceance Basin, and we have volcanic intrusions. The volcanic intrusions are the one thing that typically depletes the ability for the ground to hold economically recoverable volumes of gas. And so the repeated question over and over again was, why lease it if the potential is so very, it's low, it's in, I guess in the federal system it's said moderate, which is their lowest. Is that
It's low to moderate
Okay.
in this area.
What's the response to that?
Again, we're mandated, if we get an expression of interest, to offer it up for lease sale. It doesn't mean that the minerals are there. It is the process that has been set up for us, you know, by Congress. And so again, we may get an APD, we might not.
Not a lot.
But if the leases are let, you know, whatever monies are collected, you know, do go back to the American taxpayer.
Just change the mandate to something
Yeah,
different.
well, I'll talk about that in my closing comment. Any more questions on the potential to resource? I had several questions about the number of protest letters and stuff. Was it, how many were there? Was it really high concerning, and does that have any kind of impact?
There were 150 protest letters. That is very high, and it has a huge impact on my staff. And yes, we are working through them.
Does it have any impact on the decision, I think is what people are saying.
Again, we're taking a very close look at those protest letters, and there were quite a few themes, I think, that are running through them. So we're going to look at the substance. We're going to look at whether we have analyzed it already or not. We're going to look at whether you know, there's substance to the protest or not, and that, you know, we're not to the end of that process yet. So
that process can be completed by the 14th of May. I mean,
the 14th of February. That's our goal.
okay. Any more questions?
I have something in the miscellaneous department.
Okay, that's where we are. We're down to miscellaneous.
Colorado Parks and Wildlife is empowered by the federal and state laws to manage Colorado's wildlife as a public trust. Parks and Wildlife submitted scope and comments urging these parcels be pulled until the BLM put in stipulations to protect the wildlife that exists today, based on science from today and not the 80s. It was also submitted EA comments and filed a protest. Migration corridors are a particular concern as there are populations of native trout, neither of which were considered, let alone accounted for in the 1989 RFP. Why is the BLM ignoring the advice of the agency specifically tasked to manage our Colorado wildlife?
We have been working with CPW very closely throughout the entire process, and they did submit a protest letter, and again, we will be looking at it for their substance.
Are there any more miscellaneous comments?
I have some kind of general questions here. What's the difference between a comment and a protest?
A protest letter, first of all, whoever submits a protest letter, they have to have participated, you know, through written comments, either in the scoping phase or in the environmental assessment phase. So we had to have received comments from them before. And then a protest is protesting, in this case, the potential decision of the decision maker to make these this decision. And we will, so a protest, we will take another look at it and see once, you know, if we can resolve it or not. The protester will receive a letter from us outlining whether it can be or cannot be or whatever our finding is. We don't respond to comment letters. We don't respond to scoping letters. Individually. We do kind of slam them together. And Appendix G in the environmental assessment has all the comments kind of that we lump together and the answers on 50 pages of that. So that's the difference between a comment and a protest. Does that help? Does that make sense?
It helps, yes.
Okay.
Okay, if, I mean, there's been a number, we've submitted the comments, we've submitted the protests, we've had all of these meetings. If the RMP is not the avenue to get these parcels removed from the sale, what will it take?
Good question.
You know, I think what I think is really important when we talk about public land management is that we have processes and approaches that are the same, they're repeatable. We do things, you know, as much as we can the same way from office to office. In the case of oil and gas leasing in Colorado, over the last 2 years, we have been working on a process to provide for significant amounts of public involvement. You know, several opportunities for every lease sale, and this is an example of that. And I think, you know, where we are in that process for this particular area is we are looking still at the protest that we received. We are looking at, you know, what we learn when we're up here, and then we will give that some more thought. You know, there are a lot of folks who don't want to see any oil and gas leases in this valley, but there are other folks who do. And frankly, we also hear from some of those folks. And, you know, it's normal when you're dealing with public lands to get a wide range of opinions about any particular thing that we're doing. And although, you know, many of the folks who are opposed to this effort are very vocal, there have been folks who have contacted us and said, we do think the BLM should consider offering some parcels in the North Fork. We do think the BLM should think about finding out whether there's even any gas in this valley to worry about. And so I think it's fair to say that we've got to look at some of those kinds of thoughts. We've got to look at folks, you know, most of the folks here I think probably are opposed to the sale. And so we need to kind of look at all of that before we make a decision, because it's a wide range of public opinion on this issue. So, you know, the next step is for us to figure out what we want to recommend in this area, and then we'll go forward. If we decide that we don't want to recommend that we continue with these leases, then that addresses your question. If we decide that we do, you know, then there's a range of alternatives that can be considered. You know, one is the political process, which many folks here have tried to follow in this case, instead of a process involving the public and involving discussions with your neighbors. You know, many people in this process have not talked to the field manager, not talked to the district manager, have not talked to anybody in the state office. They've gone straight to DC. And so, so I didn't say everybody, I said many people. And so it's difficult to manage public lands and to have a process that's designed to be equitable for people with lots of different kinds of opinions if you have some segment that doesn't want to participate in the process. And we do have that in this case. So if we do decide to recommend we go forward with some leases, you know, there always is that option of the political process. There's always an option of litigation. There's an option of legislation, where if people want to approach the congressional delegation and say, let's not have any more mineral leasing in the North Fork. So there's several options that folks could pursue. But in my experience, the best option when you're working in a particular area is to try to work things out with all involved and all interests. And I haven't seen that here. So hopefully that answers your question.
Are there any more? I have one more comment. There was, I believe in yesterday's meeting in Hotchkiss, Lonnie, I believe you said that about 3% of the leases in Colorado are ever developed. And in other conversations I've had outside, not with you guys, but with what happens, why are leases important? And the answer I find is that they're potentially used as a commodity for companies. And that doesn't ring well very well here. If somebody's buying up leases and people consider that a stranglehold, and it's used to help their company improve their position in the futures markets, that's just not very palatable. And I understand that's the case. I mean, that just doesn't seem very probably right to the most average people. Do you have any response to that question?
As a field manager, I totally agree with you. My staff has just gone through hell for the last year, and it's just because some companies trying to bolster their revenues that is not a good thing.
And I don't think we're going to solve that in this venue, but are there any other questions from the? I had a closing comment.
I'd like to just make a comment to Ms. Haskins' statement. You know, I tend to agree with you on, however, it seems to me that you could help us bring all the factions together in North Fork Valley if you would go ahead and defer these leases and complete the resource management plan so that everyone in this room and all the constituents are assured that everything is being reviewed and considered so that we can have a reasonable base to start from in looking at leases. And it may very well come out, because if you make this decision in these leases and they are pursued, if anything ever happens, we're the ones that are going to pay the price. It's not going to be the oil companies, and it's not going to be the BLM. It's going to be the people that live in this valley. So I don't think it's unreasonable. I'm sorry.
Okay. If there are no more comments, I'd like to. I tried to look at this situation, step back, and write a little summation about it. As was stated earlier, many of the laws that are being followed in this lease sale were written in the 1920s, and I'm going to submit that there are probably changes in community standards since then. And I think everybody acknowledges that. The difficulty is that the extractive industry, currently in gas is what we're looking at, is possibly the biggest and most well-funded industry ever created by man. And at the congressional level, there's no impetus to try to fight that fight, because it's not a winnable thing because there's too much money behind it. So, in response, Secretary Salazar changed the process, and we've talked about that at length today, trying to get more community involvement earlier in the process. I think part of the real difficulty for all of you sitting here talking to us is that the industry probably hasn't done a whole lot of favors for themselves. You know, you can go on the internet and just find paper after paper talking about air and water quality contamination stories, and whether they're 100% accurate isn't really it's probably not really germane, because it's all becomes part of the whole overall debate. There's similar stories close to home in the San Juan and Piceance basins, and then the industry over on the Front Range with their position about that well near the school in Erie. are all really shooting themselves in the foot. And my position is that anytime that you fire up the mothers, you're probably galvanizing your opposition. That's probably not the best thing to do. And if you go online, you can find that there's Mothers Against Gas Development in Colorado, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And so the net result of that is that many people feel that the industry is not trustworthy, and they're just trying to make their own enemies. So here we've had gas wells, as we talked about, up in the muddy country for a long, long time. We know we're at the edge of the Pians Basin, and we have these rock formations that came up through, so it seems like there's less potential. And we're being on the southern edge of the basin, that is indicative of potentially less potential just by itself. And then we're told that companies can do this just to increase their futures commodities trading market, and none of those in summation just really feel bad to most people in here, because if I distill their comments down, it comes back into many of those. And so I don't know if you guys seen the book, The American Provence. It's a book written about this valley by a professor at Colorado, at CU Colorado Springs. And his wife happens to be from Provence. And so they spent a lot of time there, and then after they came over here, he's a cartographer, and he's into landforms, and he started looking at how everything was similar. And he drew, winemaking, there's really wonderful views, which we all appreciate. But as he tried to distill that down, why was it so similar? And what he comes to is sort of attachment to the land. And I think that's why you have a lot of people sitting here, because we have a lot of attachment to the land. And most of us don't come here because you can make a lot of money. We come here because of the values here. And I always say it's a pretty cool place. We have a pretty cool thing going on here, and that's rather folksy. But Chris Yates is here, and he enlightened me as to why that might be good. And he said that everything that really matters here has nothing to do with money. We have a really cool community, and the values that are probably espoused by those in this room. It's not about money. It's about living in a place where it's great for your kids and those kinds of things. So with all that attachment, that's why people are here, and people are rather, angry. So in Paonia, it's really hard to do, even a small little bureaucracy, to try to make decisions make sense. And I think that's what the people are standing in this room are asking for.